From carrier state transition to historical retention. Physics speaks of things carrying charge, energy, momentum, and information. Before asking what a carrier might mean in a more fundamental physical sense, it helps to develop the concept in a domain where persistence through organizational change is easier to recognize. Biology provides such a domain. The genome as a carrier. A genome is a hereditary carrier. Its organization is inherited, but inheritance does not require that organization to stay fixed. Mutation and recombination alter genomic organization, while selection influences which resulting organizations persist. Across these changes, the genome retains its role as hereditary carrier. This separates the persistence of the carrier from the persistence of any particular organization of it. Were the two identical, any change in organization would mean the carrier had disappeared, which is not how inheritance ordinarily works. A carrier persists not by remaining unchanged, but through changes in its organization. Carrier state and transition. The organization of a carrier at a given stage is its carrier state. This is not a different kind of carrier, but a particular organization of the same one. Variation produces a transition from one carrier state to another. The carrier persists across the transition while its organization changes, and the resulting organization stands in an inherited relationship to the preceding organization. Recursive inheritance. A resulting carrier state can itself become the inherited basis for the next transition, so the process is recursive. Each new transition acts not on an organizational blank slate, but on organization already produced by preceding transitions. This gives inheritance a cumulative character. Later states can contain features produced, modified, or preserved by earlier transitions, even though not every consequence of every transition survives. Historical retention. Historical retention is the retention, within the present organization of a carrier, of consequences of preceding transitions. It does not require a stored trajectory of past states. A genome need not encode an independent record of every preceding genomic state, every ancestral mutation, or the transitions through which its present organization arose. History matters through its consequences. If an earlier transition's effects remain incorporated into subsequently inherited organization, something of that history has been retained. This allows us to distinguish retaining history from storing a history. Historical retention and Markovian transition. This distinction clarifies how the next transition is determined. If the relevant consequences of past transitions are already incorporated into the present state, the transition need not separately consult the past. Those effects are already features of the present. Markovianity concerns what the transition depends upon. Here, it depends upon the present carrier state and the variation acting upon it rather than separately upon earlier carrier states. Historical retention concerns what that present state contains, as consequences of preceding transitions can remain embodied within its organization. The carrier state transition developed here therefore has a Markovian interpretation, without requiring history to be inconsequential. History matters because it has changed the present, not because the transition law has to reach backwards into history. Ordering succession versus carrying persistence. Successive genomic states can be ordered, with earlier states distinguished from later ones and one generation from the next. But the means of ordering is not what transmits organization between them. A generational index distinguishes generations. It does not transmit the genome. Ordering succession and carrying persistence are separate roles. An index or temporal parameter can distinguish states without being responsible for the persistence of the organization undergoing transition. What this gives us. From the biological case, a carrier is a persistent organizational structure whose present organization provides the inherited basis for subsequent change and can retain consequences of preceding transitions without requiring every consequence of its history to remain. The transition depends upon the present carrier state and the variation acting upon it. Historical retention concerns what that present state contains. In the biological case, selection contributes to the retention mechanism by influencing which variations persist through subsequent inheritance. This is particular to the biological example, but it raises a question for the proposed translation into physics. If historical retention is to form part of a carrier concept in physics, what could determine which consequences of preceding transitions, remain incorporated into its present organization. The point of the exercise. This is not a claim that biology models physics, or that a carrier in physics must behave like a genome. The purpose is conceptual. Biology lets persistence, organizational change, inheritance, and historical retention be examined separately before confronting the harder question of what could play these roles in physics. The question that follows is not yet what the carrier in physics is. It is more preliminary. If this conception of a carrier is coherent in biology, what would it mean to translate it into physics?